The worst side effect of Ozempic is not Ozempic face, but it is related to protein and muscle. I'll explain with a story. One of my followers and her friend found themselves in their 40s, 80 pounds overweight. They both chose a weight loss plan, one using Ozempic and the other using a ketogenic diet. One took an injection, the other cut carbs, but there was a key difference in their weight loss. First, let's start by unpacking that drug called Ozempic, or semaglutide. It is in a class of drugs that is a GLP-1 agonist, which means it's mimicking or acting like one of the hormones in our body. The hormone, called GLP-1, is found in the deepest, darkest parts of your bowel. Yes, in the colon. These cells, called L cells, need a few components to make this hormone. First of all, they need a special type of fat called butyrate. That special fat and those special bacteria work together to fit into a receptor and activate that cell to produce this hormone. Normally, your body produces this when you're eating, and that is the cause of that sensation that makes us feel full about 20 minutes after we start to eat. GLP-1 is notoriously low in folks with poor metabolic health. This happens to correlate with lots of people who've been overweight for years, struggling with things like insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and diabetes. When this drug did come on the market, I actually had to go back to the physiology books and look at exactly what does this hormone do. Here in this slide, I have outlined several of the things that it does naturally. Let's start with the brain. Inside the brain is where we sense the feeling of being full. This GLP-1 is actually accredited for much of that sensation. GLP-1 works inside the stomach to delay gastric emptying, or the emptying of food from the stomach. This increases your sensation of fullness with lower amounts of food. It's inside the pancreas where we get into some serious nitty-gritties on how this drug works. As GLP-1 rises, several things related to the insulin system changes. Number one, those beta cells, the cells that make insulin, they proliferate. They also tend to live longer, so the natural programmed cell death of apoptosis doesn't happen as much in these specific cells. This results in an increased production of insulin, and more is able to be secreted from those beta cells every time your body asks for insulin. All of that insulin information is boiled down to say that as your GLP-1 rises and increases within your body, your ability to listen to insulin, to become more insulin sensitive, improves. You decrease the production of glucose in the liver, and you improve that glucose storage in both fat cells and muscle cells. Finally, there is some cardioprotection or heart improvement when the GLP-1 is present in circulation. Wow, that's amazing, right? Yeah, so said many of those folks that were struggling to lose weight. Lots of those with broken metabolisms used this drug to enhance the production of GLP-1 to double, triple, and multiple times the normal physiologic level that's designed for our bodies. As they did that, that's where these side effects came from. Let's start with gastric emptying. That slowed emptying of the stomach found several patients with food in their stomach days after fasting as they prepared for surgery. During the surgery, the anesthesiology team found the food substance still in the stomach that they'd eaten days ago. And that signal not to eat, it is powerful. It has turned into the absence of wanting food in some patients. They really say, I just do not have any desire to eat. So let's go back to our gals trying to lose 80 pounds in their 40s. This woman injected Ozempic into her abdomen and was using this drug as prescribed. Weeks into using the medication, she was losing weight and had no desire for eating. But it came with a side effect that her desire for eating turned out to be really linked to how happy she was. Now, I can see the flaw in that as well. That's not a great place for your whole life to have its center for joy. But in this case, she got very depressed, really down, and was having difficulty finding a purpose for life. But like many women, the desire to lose weight, she was willing to compromise that mood. at least for the short term. So let's go to the other side. The other woman was using a ketogenic diet to lose weight. She dropped her carbohydrates to less than 20 and improved her understanding of where these carbs were coming from. Once she figured that out, she found that, yes, ketones were in production and her glucose decreased. She tracked her progress by way of morning fasting glucose and morning fasting ketones. At first, a production of ketones led her to a rapid weight loss, and then she found herself a little stuck. This is very common with insulin-resistant patients. As the body chemistry dramatically shifts at the beginning, they open up fat cells, offer that fuel to their body, feel amazing, and drop that weight pretty rapidly. As she then figured out the next phase of improving her metabolism, of keeping those ketones in circulation while keeping that blood glucose down, the journey got a little harder. She had to learn how to restrict the time during the day that she was eating. No longer having a 12-hour eating window, she narrowed it to 8 hours, and then 6, and even 5 hours. At this point, she slid that eating window closer to sunrise, finding that's what it took. Hours, close to 12 to 16 hours of no food in order to get that morning ketone above 1.0. When she did that, the weight loss returned. As she figured out how important the timing of her eating was, her blood sugars once again dropped and ketones rose. The key thing happening behind the scenes as those two metrics changed is that her insulin was dropping. As they were sharing that experience, they also traded information about how much the other one weighed. They had both lost 80 pounds, yet they looked strikingly different. Their journey began where they were both wearing pant sizes that were 16 or 18 or 20, depending on the brand. The weight loss through a ketogenic diet resulted in one woman wearing a size 4, while the other had only really dropped 1 or maybe 2 pant sizes. So what's the difference? What happened? Take a look at these two women's arms. The woman on the right used the ketogenic diet to lose the weight and is the one at size 4. The other woman used Ozempic. And much like what happens with calorie restriction, specifically the calorie restriction when patients are severely insulin resistant, they don't ignite autophagy. Autophagy is the way your body shoots cleanup and recycles many of these wasted proteins that have been stored or are lying around in tissue that is no longer necessary. Take a look at this image. At the bottom, you have a layer of fat, those blood vessels, and then a whole bunch of stuff that looks like water. Well, it's not water, it's connective tissue, and it's found between the skin and that layer of adipose or fat tissue at the bottom of our skin. The more of this blue connective tissue present, the higher the amount of, well, a skin curtain, loose skin. That part under your arm that wiggles when you don't want it to, yeah, that has a higher amount of connective tissue that isn't tightly bound to the muscle below it. As you lose fat, that fat will disappear. If you want that skin to re-adhere to the muscle below it after you've lost the fat, you must remove this connective tissue. How do you do that? Well, autophagy. So how do you get autophagy? Number one, you must lower that insulin production. If you recall, one of the most potent impacts that the GLP-1 agonists do is they work inside that pancreas, increasing the amount of insulin, cells, production, and proliferation to enhance the insulin production. Now, they'll still lose weight, but they lose weight without autophagy. When you compare this to a ketogenic state, I teach patients about the Dr. Boz ratio. This looks at blood glucose at the same time as the blood ketones. And as those numbers decline in the glucose and ketones rise, the ratio between those two also decline. I tell patients to think as the Dr. Boz ratio declines, so does your insulin. This is a predictor of autophagy. And I teach patients, if you can get it under 100, you're losing weight. If you get that Dr. Boz ratio under 80, you might have autophagy. By the time you get to 40, there's a pretty good chance. And if you've got a Dr. Boz ratio of 20, I guarantee you are in an autophagic stage, meaning you are reabsorbing that connective tissue and connecting that skin to the muscle layer. Were you curious about Ozempic? Did you want to try that? Or are you trying to get off of Ozempic? Well, I've got 3 ways that you can suppress your appetite that are better than that drug. We'll see you there.